"Ma'am, I told you, this section is for paying customers only." The police officer's voice cut through the hushed murmur of the upscale boutique. He squared his shoulders, eyes narrowing as if daring her to resist. Half the store turned, to stare. An elderly black woman gripping her tote bag, standing by a display of limited edition handbags. She simply looked at him, calm and unblinking. Somewhere behind the cashier's counter, an employee snickered. A few shoppers watched, unsure whether to intervene or pretend they didn't see. "Don't make me ask you again," the cop growled, his tone laced with condescension. She didn't raise her voice, but what came next shook the entire room. "Drop a comment if you believe respect should never depend on appearance. Tell us where you're watching from." The officer's words dripped with disdain, amplified by the hush in the boutique. It was clear he assumed she was loitering or looking for trouble rather than shopping. The brand's logo glimmered on the walls, reminders of exclusivity and luxury. A pair of stylish friends in designer coats looked on with quiet unease, but neither spoke. The woman, Harriet Moore, though no one there bothered to learn her name, didn't flinch. She clutched her worn wallet, which held her ID and military service card. She'd come here to find a special gift for her granddaughter, ignoring how out of place she might seem among the velvet furniture and crystal chandeliers. Yet Harriet was no stranger to unfair assumptions. She'd endured them. In segregated barracks decades ago, had seen them roil up in military towns where respect was a currency not always granted freely. Still, it stung to feel the weight of prejudice in a place so public, so gilded. The cop, fueled by prejudice and the store manager's silent approval, stepped closer. "You got money to be here?" he sneered, tapping his baton lightly against his open palm. He made no attempt to hide his contempt for the elderly woman whose soft-spoken presence seemed to offend him. A security guard hovered nearby, eyes flicking between Harriet and the officer. Their expression was unreadable, but their posture told the story. No one wanted to contradict law enforcement when wealthy patrons were present. The crowd's collective hush felt oppressive. Some onlookers snapped photos on their phones while others turned away, complicit in their silence. Through it all, Harriet stood steady, her unwavering dignity a stark contrast to the officers' hostility. She refused to wilt under the glare of suspicion. Behind her calm eyes lay a lifetime of service, a quiet reservoir of strength he could not see. Harriet cleared her throat gently. "Officer," she said, voice low, "I'm only here to buy a present for my granddaughter's graduation. I mean no trouble." Her politeness only seemed to stoke his ire. He glanced at the glossy display case, then at Harriet's fraying jacket and scuffed shoes. His lip curled. "Really? You sure you're not just casing the joint?" She smiled sadly. "I've got money, and I can pay." Her wrinkled hand reached into her purse, revealing a wallet with enough cash to cover the pricey handbag. She extended it in a gesture of goodwill, hoping to diffuse the tension. But the officer shook his head, unmoved. "Lady, don't insult me. People like you don't belong in places like this." He waved a dismissive hand. "Now, move along before I escort you out myself." Nearby, an older woman in pearls whispered, "This is just wrong," but didn't dare voice it any louder. A young man with a smartphone aimed his camera discreetly, capturing every second, yet did not step forward to intervene. The store manager hovered in the background, waiting for a chance to placate wealthy shoppers while encouraging Harriet to leave. Pain flickered briefly in Harriet's eyes. She could have argued her case more forcefully, demanded respect, or threatened legal action. Instead, she took a long breath. "I'm sorry if you feel that way," she said softly, "but I'm not causing any harm. I'm just here to shop." Her attempt at peace was dismissed with a laugh and a mocking roll of the eyes. "You think an apology changes anything?" the cop snapped. "Take your business elsewhere, or I'll drag you out." Humiliation, anger, a rising sense of injustice. Harriet's shoulders slumped for a moment, but she held her composure. She'd seen worse in her time, though it never got easier to bear. The officer's voice rose, drawing even more attention. "So, you're not leaving, huh?" His glare hardened, and a few people in the store stepped back as though afraid the situation might become physical. A hush spread through the boutique's corridors, the kind that made every breath feel amplified. Harriet didn't respond. Her silence seemed to provoke him further. He took a step closer, the overhead lights gleaming off his badge. His posture spoke of unchecked authority, of a man not used to being questioned. A distinguished gentleman standing by a glass display of expensive watches cleared his throat. "Officer, maybe you should calm down. She's just—" "Mind your business," the cop barked. The onlooker immediately retreated. Nobody wanted to become the target of that hostility. Behind the register, the store manager eyed Harriet anxiously, flipping through receipts as if searching for a reason to eject her. Tension rippled outward like a shockwave. Even the air felt colder, and somewhere near the dressing rooms a security guard paused, uncertain whether to assist the cop or intervene. Harriet stood firm, one hand resting lightly on the counter for balance. A lifetime of discipline, earned through nights on military bases and missions she'd long since lost count of, kept her rooted. She said nothing, letting the officer's fury and the thick silence speak volumes. A young woman in a sleek dress took a timid step forward. "Ma'am, do you need help?" she whispered, eyes flicking nervously from Harriet to the officer. Harriet gave her a grateful nod but said nothing. It was as if time stretched out, each second thick with tension. And in that silence, Harriet's calm presence seemed to grow more formidable. She was done apologizing. The storm would break soon, and she was more ready than they could ever imagine. Suddenly, a sharp voice pierced the tense atmosphere. "Excuse me, Captain Moore?" The question came from a petite woman in a crisp pantsuit who strode into the boutique like she owned it. She clutched a thick folder stamped with the seal of the governor's office. All heads turned. The officer froze, baton half raised. Harriet's gaze met the newcomers with quiet recognition. "Yes, Lieutenant Garcia," she said gently, greeting her with respectful familiarity. The hush deepened, confusion rippling through the crowd. "Lieutenant." Garcia glanced from Harriet to the glowering cop, reading the situation in an instant. She spoke directly to the officer, each word sharp and precise. "Captain Harriet Moore served in active combat zones for over 30 years. She's a decorated veteran who was just honored by the governor last month." She tapped the folder, revealing a photograph of Harriet shaking hands with the state's highest officials. The officer's mouth fell open. He stared at the photograph, then at Harriet. You're... Garcia didn't wait for him to finish. Her voice rose, so there was no mistaking her words. "Captain Moore has devoted her life to protecting citizens, including the likes of you, officer." Whispers rippled through the customers like an electric current. Several recognized Harriet's face from news segments about decorated war heroes. The store manager's cheeks paled. Phone cameras instantly refocused on Harriet, capturing the moment of revelation. Garcia turned to Harriet, voice softening. "I'm so sorry you had to endure this. I came to deliver your official commendation papers." She handed Harriet the folder with great care, as if it were a precious artifact. In that single exchange, the balance of power shifted. The man who had been so quick to dismiss Harriet now stood in disbelief. No one could ignore the gravity of what they'd just witnessed. The silent, dignified woman was a true American hero. As the whispered awe spread throughout the boutique, Harriet remained a quiet pillar of composure. Even exposed to the spotlight, her posture didn't shift from humility to pride. She stayed the same calm presence she'd been all along. Garcia began listing Harriet's merits, voice carrying clearly. Captain Moore was deployed in multiple crisis zones, served during high-level peace negotiations, and trained new recruits in cutting-edge rescue operations. She earned a Purple Heart for her bravery under fire. She paused, eyeing the officer's stunned expression. Her record speaks for itself. The onlookers gaped, some nervously adjusting their clothes as if trying to show respect they'd withheld only moments ago. A few stepped closer, offering contrite smiles. Others simply stared, thunderstruck at how wrong they'd been in their assumptions. Meanwhile, Harriet exuded the same grace she'd shown under interrogation moments before. She reached out to pat Lieutenant Garcia's arm softly. "Thank you," she said, her tone so gentle it wrapped the tension in a soothing balm. Her unwavering dignity was a testament to her real power, an inner steel forged through years of discipline and service. Every movement was deliberate, controlled, a hallmark of someone who'd faced adversity too many times to count and had learned to rise above it. The officer, who had reveled in asserting his dominance, now shrank back, visibly rattled. His stern demeanor faltered. He sputtered a half-apology, his words stumbling out in a tangled rush. The crowd shifted, their gazes turning from judgment to curiosity, then to remorse. Amid the tension and swirling disbelief, Harriet was a study in humility and principled resolve. She had no need to gloat or humiliate anyone. Her record, her posture, her composed silence spoke louder than any boastful words ever could. Harriet took a steady breath and stepped forward, the entire boutique collectively holding its own. She turned to the police officer, whose face was flushed with a mix of shame and lingering hostility. With a calm that transcended the moment's intensity, she spoke clearly for all to hear. "Officer, I believe an apology is due, not just for me, but for anyone who has ever been treated as less than they are." For a heartbeat, he said nothing. The store manager hovered nervously, wringing his hands. Then, as if the weight of scrutiny was too great, the cop mumbled, "I'm sorry," his voice barely above a whisper. Some in the boutique began to clap, hesitant at first, then louder. It was a release of tension, an acknowledgement that justice, even if incomplete, was stirring. Harriet inclined her head in a small nod, accepting the apology without fanfare. Sensing the moment, Lieutenant Garcia quietly added, "I'll be informing the precinct of this encounter, officer." Her eyes flickered with a stern promise of accountability. Harriet then turned to the store manager, who had been silent up until now. "I came here to buy a present, not cause a scene, but I do hope that the next time someone walks in who doesn't look like your usual customer, they're treated with respect." The manager swallowed hard, cheeks reddening. "Yes, of course, Captain Moore," he said, voice shaky. "Please allow me to offer you any handbag you'd like on the house." Harriet shook her head gently, shoulders still dignified. "I don't need charity. I just need equality." She pulled out her wallet and placed exact bills on the glass counter, claiming the bag she initially intended to purchase. In that moment, her decisive, unwavering stance demonstrated who truly held the power. As Harriet made her purchase, the crowd that had huddled in tense silence erupted in scattered applause. Relief mingled with a collective sense of awe, flooding the boutique with a renewed energy. Those who had looked away earlier, uncomfortable and complicit, now gravitated closer, quietly thanking her or offering small words of support. The officer stared at the ground, face red as he realized cameras were still rolling. The security guard, who had hovered uselessly, now positioned themselves awkwardly at a distance, unsure of how to salvage any authority. It was clear the tables had turned. Harriet, who moments ago was being shoved aside and labeled an intruder, was now the undisputed focus of admiration. The manager scrambled to regain footing, promising to revise store policies and hold staff training on inclusivity and customer respect. Harriet nodded graciously but without gloating. She understood that real change required more than quick fixes, or PR gestures. Lieutenant Garcia quietly pulled the officer aside, speaking in low, measured tones. Though their words were hushed, the meaning was clear. There would be repercussions. You could see the officer's shoulders droop, as if coming to terms with the blow to his career and reputation. Meanwhile, other shoppers offered Harriet handshakes and quiet thanks. A young man with tears in his eyes murmured, "My mother served, too. Thank you for everything you've done." Harriet offered him a gentle smile in return, no trace of bitterness on her face. The shift in atmosphere was palpable. The store that had felt so cold and hostile just minutes before now hummed with remorseful unity and overdue respect. Harriet hadn't raised her voice or demanded retribution. Her dignity had done all the talking. And in that peaceful stand, a valuable lesson was etched into every witness's heart. Harriet left the boutique with her newly purchased gift, carrying more than just a designer handbag. She carried the weight of another small victory in a lifetime of challenges. One more instance of proving that dignity knows no color, rank, or social status. By the next morning, video clips of the confrontation had gone viral. Viewers worldwide watched the elderly black female veteran stand unshaken before a racist cop, revealing the power of quiet resolve. Hashtags demanding respect for veterans and calling out discriminatory policing lit up social media. In response, local law enforcement announced a new training curriculum on racial sensitivity and community relations. The boutique's management pledged to overhaul their customer service guidelines, vowing never again to let prejudice drive their actions. For Harriet, recognition was never the goal. She had spent decades safeguarding people's freedom, not for applause or headlines, but because it was the right thing to do. As news anchors clamored for interviews and local activists hailed her as a hero, she simply returned home, set the handbag aside, and brewed a cup of tea. In the quiet of her living room, she smiled, imagining her granddaughter's delight. That was the reward she cherished, seeing the next generation stepping into a world that was, inch by inch, becoming more just. Her only hope was that the lesson learned today wouldn't be forgotten tomorrow. Have you ever witnessed someone being treated this way? Would you have spoken up? Do you believe respect is a right, not a reward? Comment below.